Hello, I'm Paul Rocco, and you're listening to Reprint, brought to you by the Temple News, your in-depth look into the stories you need to know about. This week, I speak to opinion editor McCaillaigh Rouse about Anthony Bourdain and the impact he had on her life. Then I speak to assistant news editor Kylie Sokoloff about the growing mental health concerns among the class of 2029. You probably wrote one of my favorite essays of all time because I am a massive Bourdain fan, so thank you for that. Tell me a little bit about what this essay is about.
Yeah, so essentially I wrote this essay about my personal love and relationship with Anthony Bourdain, the chef, the journalist. He's kind of everything that I've over throughout my life been a fan of. I remember as a kid, I used to watch his show on the Food Network, him, Guy Fieri, Diners, Dives, and Drives show, and then Anthony Bourdain's No Reservations. I remember watching them with my dad all the time and being on the couch at 7 years old, being that's the grossest thing I've ever seen, him eating fermented shark or something else disgusting, and being such a fan of his unabashed passion for food. I just didn't really understand as a kid, but as I got older in high school, I came back to him and watched him again whenever he passed away and was reminded of why I really loved his passion for life. It also inspired me in high school to come to college and pursue journalism or writing career in general because of his journalism background. And then I would say the third time I was reminded of Anthony Bourdain was this past summer. I read his book for the first time, Kitchen Confidential. Have you read it?
I have not, unfortunately.
Okay. Worth reading.
I know. My roommate's been trying to get me to read his copy, but
it's really good.
I know.
So I read it when I was in Ireland over the summer, and it was a bit more eye-opening than I think I expected it to be, because it was a bit deeper into his life rather than just the excitement of traveling to different countries, eating a bunch of food, meeting people from all over the place. It was about the reality of it all, the reality of life, and kind of the downfalls, the uplifting parts of it, and everything in between, especially in the background of living in a kitchen and working in a restaurant. So that's essentially what it's about. It's about how I found, my own personal inspiration in Anthony Bourdain and kind of how I saw myself in him as well at times.
Yeah, 100%. I'm glad you brought up dives. What is it? Drive-throughs, dives, or whatever.
Diners,
there we go.
Dives.
Yeah, and then I was also going to bring it up, man versus food. I appreciate Anthony Bourdain a lot, for one, because you have those shows that explore food and these quirky parts about it and, the insane combinations you can, whatever. And, I find these hosts are very quirky and insane, just as quirky and insane as the food they cover. But Bourdain had this power of connecting the food to real life issues that I really appreciated. And it was, I don't know, I feel I don't know if you get this sense, but food is almost a metaphor to him for much deeper real life issues.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that's why I loved him so much as a kid, and maybe I didn't even know it, that I've always been a kid. I say this in my essay, I've always been a kid, and even now I have extreme anxiety. Who doesn't? But I'm one of those people that can foretell what's going to happen, or I can see so many different events that it's just outlandish. I'm crossing the street in my head, I'm oh my God, a car is going to hit me. But then I saw this show, I rewatched the show, or I read his book, and it was him talking about these experiences of eating extraordinary food from extraordinary places, and it was trying something new just to try it. And I think I realized that he did a lot of these things to maybe confront anxiety in a different way. And it was a big inspiration for me. I think I saw it as an outlet that anxiety doesn't have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to overtake you. You can, source it into other parts of your life. For Anthony Bourdain, it was going to different places, eating different foods.
Yeah, 100%. Tell me a little bit about how his death maybe affected you. Because I know, for one, and then there's never a situation where the way he passed is okay, or should have been the right move, in no way. But I remember hearing what led up to that and thinking, man, it didn't have to happen that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think for me personally, whenever Anthony Bourdain died, I believe it was 2018. It was like one of the first times for me that I can remember a celebrity that I like looked up to that passed away, and I think it affected me in a way that was like, oh, I'm not invincible, and neither was he. And I think a lot of people could say that about celebrities that they have known and loved and looked up to that have passed. It's kind of this experience of, oh, they were on this pedestal, but just because you're on the pedestal doesn't mean you don't experience life like we all do. And for him, it was like this trauma, this, you know, these demons that many people have lying inside of them kind of overcame him. And seeing that happen when I was younger and, you know, when I got older just this past summer, I kind of saw it as another eye-opening experience, as I said before, where it's like these personal demons that we all have, or these personal anxieties that I experience, and other, you know, mental health problems that many people have are like, they can take a hold of you, and they took a hold of Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I'll take it a step further by saying I connect those two thoughts and saying that just because you experience all these uplifting events of traveling the world, facing your anxieties, facing your scared moments, and, you know, just because you do those things doesn't mean it gets rid of these like inner overarching terrors that you might have. And for me, it was looking at Anthony Bourdain was kind of like a reflection of, you know, looking at myself. It's like, just because I can go around the world, just because I can write what I write about, doesn't mean that it like gets rid of all these feelings in my life.
Yeah.
So I'd say his death affected me in that way. It was just kind of like a way of putting it all into perspective, I guess, is the best way to wrap that up.
Yeah. No, and to that point, kind of, you, in one of the final sentences of your essay, you kind of talk about how, you know, maybe Bourdain is just, you know, an older chef gentleman that is kind of running away from his own demons and going on these travels, something along those lines. Sorry if I butchered it, but I think that kind of resonated with me because I see that in people that work in kitchens, or maybe our line of work, in these stressful environments where it's kind of driven by adrenaline almost, and thrill seeking. And I just wanted to say, like, that really resonated with me, that kind of just like this energy that you're put in these lines of work, and that's like that being kind of a blockade, or a way of blocking out other stresses. That just really sat with me, which was awesome. Yeah. And I think for me personally, I food is the one aspect that I don't listen to Bourdain in. I do take risk in my life. I think as I've become more of a fan of him, I've taken more risks. But I'd like to see like what aspects of your life you put it towards, because I know food-wise, carrots still scare me. And
carrots?
Yeah.
The vegetable.
Vegetables I don't like, so I haven't taken risks. I mean, you saw me on Thursday in Harrisburg. I didn't eat a sandwich there because they all looked disgusting to me.
Oh, I didn't notice that. Well, they were pretty gross.
Yeah, I had like chips, brownies, and cookies,
Wow.
and that's it. But
whole plate.
Yeah, is it just every aspect of your life you think you're taking risk in now?
I would say yeah. I would say the food is, like you said before, like a metaphor more or less. I wouldn't say I'm out there trying something disgusting. I don't even know what, but I would say it is more metaphorical for me personally. I think it's like you're talking about that like adrenaline. I think in journalism, adrenaline is a big part of our job. Like for opinion, I try to push the mark in the things that I write about, whether it's like pushing administration to do better, and it's kind of like maybe pushing them a little bit too hard gives me like that adrenaline rush. It makes my heart beat. If they like email me and say, you know, this isn't the best way to put it or something like that, it makes me feel like what I'm writing about can accomplish something good, and that's an adrenaline rush. So for me, I kind of connect that to Bourdain's pushing his limits. By pushing the limits of like what I'm writing about in journalism, by pushing the limits of who I can reach out to and support, what sort of things I can change on an administrative level or some other factor. that's kind of like what I took from Anthony Bourdain is, push your limits. He has this phrase, which I made my title, is be a traveler, not a tourist.
Yeah.
And I think that's, once again, like a metaphor for me. Don't just take life as it flows with you, swim against the grain, swim against the currents, do something that makes you try a little bit harder, get that sweat.
Yeah.
Even though it's not like the easiest way to go about it, you could be swimming with the current and it's, you'll get to some point faster, but if you swim against the current, you'll see things that other people don't see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that made sense, but
yeah,
that's
no,
kind of
100%.
how I go for it.
100%. Another way I see Bourdain is just like a collection of Bourdainisms and quotes. And I'll just end it like, I don't know if you want to share one of your favorite quotes if you have one, but I know mine for me is to sit alone or with a few friends, half drunk under a full moon. You understand just how lucky you are. It's a story you can't tell. It's a story by definition you can't share. And I've looked in real time. I've learned in real time to look at these moments and realize I just had a really good moment or something along those lines. So yeah, I just wanted to share that with the audience. I thought, I don't know, it's my favorite quote.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
Do you have one at all, or?
I don't know if I have a quote per se. Every time I think of Anthony Bourdain, I think of one episode, and I can't remember which show it's from. Maybe No Reservations or some other form of television he did. But it was an episode where he was in, I want to say Taiwan, and he was in this random part of Taiwan, and he was just going through the marshes, and he goes up to this house of this woman in the middle of nowhere, and he just sits there and eats a meal with her, and it was like a home cooked dinner that she was making for her family, and it was just like he was like, this is the best meal I've ever had, and it made me realize there's simplicity in that. I don't know, I think of that episode every time I think of Anthony Bourdain. Was, he was chasing all these thrills. He was looking for the grossest thing he could find or the biggest attention way he could turn heads. But his best meal that he spoke of, from what I can remember, was just that simple meal.
Yeah.
But, there's great things in simplicity.
100%. Yeah. Well, I know I miss him. So, yeah. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks.
Now I speak to assistant news editor Kylie Sokoloff about the growing mental health concerns in the class of 2029. Yeah, you wrote a really important piece in the mental health print edition about some disturbing statistics. So do you want to give us a quick summary of what that was all about?
Yeah, sure. So my angle for the piece, I came across this survey done by CIRP, and it sort of is a survey that attempts to predict trends for future college classes, the incoming class of 2029 specifically. Mm-hmm. They canvassed for about a year. I think it was around 30,000 participants nationally. And some of the key statistics were about diversity. They were about political activism, how many students were involved in protests and other forms of activism in the last year, which I thought was an interesting point. And particularly rising mental health concerns. So I focused mainly on the increase in diversity and mental health concerns in students because Temple has great infrastructure for both of those groups. And it made me think about, how does Temple predict trends if they do at all? And that was what my piece was about.
Yeah, for sure. If you know the stats to your top of your head, what do you think are some of the most disturbing stats you saw?
Disturbing? I don't know.
Or worrying, maybe.
I think maybe not surprisingly, I noticed a lot of, particularly in the mental health statistics, non-binary and genderqueer students either were already experiencing increased mental health troubles or they predicted that they would, which was an interesting aspect. It was about, predicting if you'll need mental help in the future.
Right.
And it was something like about 50% of men reported expecting using mental health services, and then that number rose to 65% for women, and then it was 91% of genderqueer students, which I think accurately reflects how I would feel if I were one of those students in the current political climate.
Sure. Yeah, 100%. And I know you touched on, I think, COVID in the article a little bit. But what else can we kind of attribute the rises to these mental health crises, you think?
Something interesting that both of the resource directors I interviewed said, they both specifically used the phrase the last 10 years. In the last 10 years, we've seen an increase. And they've both worked at Temple for, I think one, Stacy's 15 years, and then Mark has worked here for 25 years.
Right.
And, Mark, sort of ironically pointed to his phone, in the interview and was talking about dopamine scrolling and stuff like that. And, joking about how he had to pull students back from the street on our big walking campus.
Yeah.
Because they were looking at their phone.
Right.
I don't know if I can necessarily pinpoint what exactly happened 10 years ago, but it coincided with the release of the iPhone. So yeah.
You mentioned in the article how as these trends develop, Temple therefore adjusts their resources and what they're doing to kind of combat and set that off. Recently, how have they been adjusting their resources?
Well, I talked to them about how they do conduct their own surveys.
Yeah.
The Tuttleman does their mental health survey every 2 years to assess needs, and then the Hope Center for Basic Needs does their basic needs survey pretty much when they feel like it. I think it's about twice a year.
Yeah.
And the Cherry Pantry specifically, because with the increase in diversity in students, a lot of diverse students unfortunately end up making an increase in first generation students due to systemic oppression, etc. And the Cherry Pantry has definitely increased their resources, particularly. I'm actually about to talk to them about what they're going to do for tariffs if they're going to increase their egg prices. So that's interesting to think about. Costs are going up for basic necessities.
Yeah.
So they've done that. And then Tuttleman is constantly evolving, I would say. And, Mark was talking about how they all sort of get together as a team. They combine their leadership and they all try to stay informed. They, look at trends going on campus as well as trends happening nationally to adjust. Yeah.
And in these departments, separate surveys or in their joint kind of findings, what kind of trends have they been noticing on campus?
Mark Dennis, the Tuttleman provost, definitely said that there's broadly been an increase of loneliness and depression on campus. That was sort of when we were talking about the phone thing. And I would say at the same time, it all sort of coincides. And then, the Hope Center has seen it's sort of conflated because there's been an increase of needs insecurity, but then that leads to sort of personal insecurity, it sucks not to have food or not to have what you need to go to school. So the two kind of collaborate in that way. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else? This is a big story. So is there anything that I might have missed that you want to add to it?
I would just say to students, incoming or not, something this story taught me is that we really do have a lot of great infrastructure, whether you have emotional or other, needs that are not being met. We pay tuition to use these sources, so use them.
Yeah, and they're readily accessible. Where can people find them, maybe?
Yeah, the Hope Center, just got a building built for them. They were sort of an online resource for a while, but I think in 2023 there's a building built. So go check out the Hope Center. Go check out the Cherry Pantry. Tuttleman has drop-in hours if you're part of those increasing statistics. Yeah.
Thank you to our editors, McCaillaigh and Kylie, for joining me on this episode, and make sure to check out all their work on the Temple News website. I'm Pablo Rocco, podcast editor for the Temple News, and this is Reprint.